Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome, Luke. Thank you so much for joining me, Luke, the
Hi.
Bearded Heretics, here this afternoon for our very first library chat that I've been looking forward to bringing this series of little bit more serious conversations about topics and issues that you all have suggested to me repeatedly you want to go over. And today, Luke has decided to join us very happily on my part to talk about narcissism in social media. Luke, would you like to introduce yourself to them?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Luke. I'm the Bearded Heretic on YouTube. My channel is more about kind of atheism and trying to take a more positive approach to atheism
Mm-hmm.
than I see elsewhere. But I guess this subject specifically is like really interesting to me because I have like a psychology background. I work in mental health and learning disability services, and I have like a degree in psychology, master's degree in forensic psychology. So yeah, this is like my bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's what I love.
This, I would say, I picked the right person. This is your wheelhouse, so to speak. And I
Yeah.
am only intrigued by the subject, and I will claim no extensive knowledge of it at all. Just a layman's knowledge of what I see out there. And from our conversations, it's not really that far off from some of the things
Mm.
that we had been talking about. So on that, do you mind if I pull up the presentation and we just start with, just what we're going to do here, just to lay it out for you. I did put it in the description, everyone. We're going to only touch on this lightly as far as the difference in the definitions between narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder, and then narcissistic traits. Then we're going to talk about what you're actually seeing out there and the effects that social media may have on these disorders. And then if we'd still have time, talk to you about recognizing it and what you can do to back yourself out of certain situations when you feel like this kind of stuff is going on. Hopefully that's going to be helpful to a lot of people, especially the ones that have been DMing me about it and having conversations about it privately out here on YouTube for a while now. So I look forward to it. I'm going to bring
Sounds
up
good.
person first the definition, which this is just for you all to see visually. But Luke, could you please tell us, like, what is the actual definition of narcissism?
Yeah, so I think it's quite broad. I mean, like it comes from for those of you who don't know, it comes from like a Greek myth from Narcissus, who was
Mm-hmm.
a guy who was looking at himself, like hadn't never seen his reflection, and then saw himself in a river, and then stayed looking at himself for
Mm-hmm.
ever until he died because he was so encapsulated by his own image. And I think that is probably a really good way of like thinking about what narcissism
Mm-hmm.
is. Is it is that kind of that grandiosity, that self-importance,
Mm-hmm.
that love of yourself and thinking that
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of better than everyone else. That's a really kind of like
Yeah.
key aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
So
And in like an exaggerated form. It's like you see
yeah,
yourself.
over exaggerated. So it's
Yeah.
grandiosity.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about like grandiosity, it's like it's overinflating what good traits you have. So
Mm-hmm.
you might be quite good at, like, I don't know, like making friends, but if you're like grandiose, then you think you're the best at making friends, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like kind of that, even though there might be some truth to it, it's that elevated, that kind of like overinflated perception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so, and then there is, of course, then now the other term that we want to talk about, which is not only narcissism, but narcissistic personality disorder, which is this is the actual clinical definition, correct?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that this is kind of this is part of the reason why I was quite excited to do this, because I see kind of a lot of people talking about others as calling them narcissists, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that clinical definitions are very important, and that they're very kind of like specific, um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's important to differentiate between them. So even if you're using the word colloquially, you need to be aware that you're using the word colloquially. Um, so
Right.
the DSM-5 criteria. So this is the DSM-5 is the diagnostic manual for psychiatrists to diagnose people with different like psychological disorders, and it has a whole range of different personality disorders.
Mm-hmm.
Narcissistic personality disorder is one of them, and big parts of it is around kind of how your like narcissistic traits affect your social functioning. That's a really key
Mm-hmm.
part of it. There's an impairment there. It has to be an impairment, otherwise it wouldn't be a
Right.
disorder, right? So
Exactly.
your ability to have a solid identity, your ability to um, uh, empathize with other people and have intimate relationships and like kind of like
Mm-hmm.
meaningful relationships, is going to be affected by that grandiosity, by that kind of like
Mm-hmm.
overinflated ego. And the important thing with narcissistic personality disorder is that it kind of has to be believed for it to
Mm-hmm.
be um, diagnosed in that way. In when I see people describing other people as narcissistic, and I guess we'll come on to the difference between this and narcissistic traits in
Mm-hmm.
a second, because that's what
Right.
we'll talk about. But
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of the time, I don't genuinely believe that the person who they're describing as narcissistic
Mm-hmm.
believes that they're actually better or whatever. It's almost like kind of like a defense mechanism in that sense.
Right. Right.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, narcissistic personality disorder is quite rare. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
like prevalence rates are like somewhere between. And I mean, prevalence rates are always kind of a bit dodgy, but they're anywhere between like 0.5% to like
And that's a
5%.
very small percentage compared to how often this term narcissist is thrown around. I mean,
Mm,
this I hear this term. I hear someone called a narcissist several times a day on social media regularly, and they're not actually referring to the condition. They must be referring to the traits because it would be impossible based on
yeah,
what you're saying. And I
yeah,
think that's an important distinction that people make between um, the personality disorder and the narcissistic traits, because um
absolutely, yeah.
yeah, would it be safe to say that if we're all out here, like say YouTubers in general, would it be safe to say that most of us have some narcissistic trait to us, whether mild, like on a scale, like not overtly,
Mm,
but I mean, we do like attention, we have YouTube channels, we do like
yeah.
to talk,
I mean,
um
I guess it's about being careful with your language and knowing what you mean
mhm.
by it, because I
Mhm.
think that there's a difference between like um so I mean, I guess I would say that on any kind of social media, the prevalence of narcissistic people would increase automatically. So it wouldn't be that
Mhm.
0.5%. It'll probably, I don't know, maybe be like 15%, but it'd still be not like most people. Most people would not
Mhm.
have narcissistic personality disorder.
Right.
Um,
Not the disorder, but maybe traits, because you
traits,
you
I
Mhm.
think, yeah, but I think that um, everyone has these kind of traits in them.
Mhm.
It's just about kind of like the kind of I mean, there's loads of elements that affect our ways of doing this, how much like kind of attention we get from our friends and family, how much
Mm-hmm.
we like are we being validated in certain aspects of our lives? Like, you know, I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people come to YouTube and other social media platforms to get validation for certain aspects of their lives that they don't in their
Right.
real life, you know.
Right.
um
Right.
and
Yeah.
create a
And
facade, you know.
becoming more and more prevalent, especially what we just went through with the pandemic and
Mm,
isolation. Can you tell me, and for everyone else, and of course I'm very curious as to know what exactly, when we say narcissistic traits, what traits are we talking about? Like, just simply, you don't have to go into extreme detail, but as far as you'd like and are
yeah.
comfortable with.
So I guess traits would be what appears to be the case, right? So somebody appears to be acting in a certain way that links to a certain type of behavior. So when we're thinking about narcissism, we're thinking about that grandiose sense of self, that sense of importance, that overinflated ego, those types of things. Now, the difference between the traits and um, the disorder is that traits don't necessarily have a negative impact on your social functioning. So you could have
Mm-hmm.
an overinflated ego, but it doesn't actually impact your relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Traits could also be you could have a reduced amount of traits. So you might have one of the things. So it might be that you have an overinflated ego, but none of the other traits are associated with narcissistic personality disorder. And then
Right.
the third thing with it is that it could be uh, coming from that behavior could be coming from a different type of place. So rather than it
Mm-hmm.
being, oh, I believe I'm better than everyone, it's actually a place of low self-esteem. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I'm better than everyone, and I think I'm worse. So I need to defend myself and almost take back control of this certain situation to
Mm-hmm.
otherwise I'm worthless.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what I see a lot more. I think that is probably where people are actually coming from, rather than actually just having true narcissism.
I would have to agree with that. I actually think it is. It's almost like a deflection. It's like a protection mechanism. It's like put it out farther, bigger, stronger than it is, because I don't want them to look. I don't want them to see. I don't feel very good about it. I see
Yeah,
that a lot. Yeah, I see
especially with
that.
about sorry,
Go on. No, go ahead. Go
especially
on.
with about being wrong. Like I think that's the key one. Like when people
Mm-hmm.
think, oh, that person can never be wrong, they must be a narcissist. No, that person usually attaches a lot of importance to being correct and
Mm-hmm.
intelligent, and they want to have these values. They might not feel like they have
Mm-hmm.
those traits in real life, or that they're not perceived. So when they come online, they're trying to act like, I'm really intelligent, I'm important.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that's challenged, it's like almost like they're physically being challenged, and then they react to it in that, no, I'm right, and then they assert
Mm-hmm.
themselves more. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that being wrong about things is a key one for especially
Yeah.
our community.
Yeah. And not being open to the conversation, being
Mm.
challenged in anything that they're saying, things of that nature, being wanted to take for their word alone, without providing any action or. Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of this. I do, and that's why I wanted to have the conversation, because, you know, people throw their terms around without understanding them, and it actually damages how we communicate with each other. It actually damages how we perceive certain situations, and how the language itself gets used. Eventually it changes it. Would you agree? Like, if we don't use the terms properly, we end up changing the culture of how the terms get used down
Well,
the
yeah,
road.
this
Yeah.
is it, and we're at risk of minimizing what that actually means.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we describe
Mm-hmm.
everyone as narcissistic, then
Mm-hmm.
what's the point in even using that term
Mm-hmm.
anymore? It has no
Right. Right.
value. So
Mm-hmm.
so my worry is that, especially clinical terms, and I
Mm-hmm.
have this about other things, about like even psychopathy, stuff like that, psychopaths.
Mm-hmm.
If we start using them in a way that diminishes what they mean, then when we meet
Right.
someone who's truly
Mm-hmm.
psychopathic or truly
Mm-hmm.
narcissistic, then we're our guard is completely down,
Mm-hmm.
because we've
Exactly.
never met someone that's actually that,
Mm-hmm.
that potentially
Mm-hmm.
dangerous.
Right, and that is why I was so excited to have this conversation, because that is a true concern. Because to a real narcissist, right, it can be a dangerous person. There is a little bit of from what I read, and I'm not an expert, so you'll correct me at any time. There is could be a little bit of psychopathy. They like it can get a little much. It can get very hard for the person that may be in a relationship with a narcissist to deal with. It can be, a lot more, and it shouldn't be made light of. It is a harrowing experience for those that are tied into it,
Yeah.
although rarer than we think. And that is also true. With the lack of empathy, the lack of social skill, the relationships, they don't have long-term, committed long-term relationships from what I've read, except for like they keep you around for in other aspects
Oh
because they
yeah.
don't let go. They can never
Mhm.
let go. They set their eyes on you, and that's it. It's a control issue from what I've been the information that you had sent me and the articles that I was reading and the studies. It's very, very serious. So to use the language correctly is really important, to use the terms
Yeah.
correctly. But that doesn't mean that we're not seeing parts of it everywhere. And I can understand why people want to use it, but I'd rather see them start adding the word traits to the end of it, or
Yeah.
or use the actual trait term, like you're suffering from some grandiosity there, or you got a little bit of a self-importance going on that I don't really agree with. Maybe
Mm.
identifying the traits instead of just well, I'm not talking to him, he's a narcissist.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. Because and like just going on to like the dangerousness of like true like proper narcissists. Narcissism is
Mm-hmm.
one of what's called, I don't know if you've heard of the dark triad of personality.
No, no, you want to tell us, you want to tell
Yeah,
me
so
about
this
that?
is essentially it's like the idea that it's the most dangerous personality type. So there's three different aspects to it. There's narcissism, psychopathy, and then
Mm-hmm.
something called Machiavellianism, which is kind of
Okay.
around like being motivated by self-interest and
Mm-hmm.
not worrying too much around like morals and how you reach that goal, but like kind of you can tread on people essentially in order to
Oh,
do
that
that.
sounds
So
like evil dictatorships and
yeah,
stuff. Is that what we're talking
exactly.
about? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so it comes from Machiavelli, the philosopher who wrote
Mm-hmm.
a book I think called Capital,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so these three together are like super dangerous because you have someone who feels they're really important, will do anything in their own self-interest, and lacks any kind of empathy, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
like really dangerous. So it's one of those things, and if you break it down, then it's like kind of like you have someone who's, if it's just narcissism, if we ignore the other two aspects, it's
Mm-hmm.
someone who feels they're more important than everyone and feels like they're the best at things. So they're gonna tread on people. They're gonna use people to reach
Mm-hmm.
their goals and stuff. That's just part of
Mm-hmm.
their thing. But I think that because of it, like a lot of people see the um, manipulative tactics of people who
Mm-hmm.
have low self-esteem and who appear to be narcissistic as like the tools of a narcissist, but they're to use very different manipulations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting. It's almost like it's a bit of a double-edged sword because they appear the same way, but then they use kind of different routes to get what they need. If that
Right,
makes
and they
sense.
use different ruses and also different reasons. And
Yeah.
from what I was reading, in again, much more, I was I got the idea that most people in these using manipulation tactics against others to get their ways or to look better in a different light are coming from low self-esteem, from
Mm.
coming from a hiding place, a place of like they don't want you to know actually who they are or what's going on, and it's kind of like a deflection cover, and a need to control the situation so you don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
Um, I,
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of what we deal with out here on a regular basis.
Yeah. No, I think
Yeah.
I totally agree, and I think that I've seen
Mhm.
that a lot where it's I watch somebody who's someone else is labeled as narcissistic, and then
Mhm.
I'm trying to see why they think that, and I can see, oh,
Mhm.
this person actually doesn't think much of themselves. This is all they've got.
Mhm.
They've got they're
Mhm.
powerful in this community. They have a couple of thousand people that are following them and listening to them.
Mhm.
Um, they have people like wanting to like attending all their streams and doing as they ask when they say, oh yeah, go like jump on this person and uh, troll this person and stuff. And then when they get into their real life, they're probably not. I mean, they may have friends and stuff, but they're probably, I'd say, probably a bit lonely, or at least not validated
Mhm.
in the way that they need to be.
Mhm. Mhm.
They might have to
Yeah.
hide certain aspects of themselves, which they don't have to online.
Right. And social media itself, the platforms that we're on, all of them, not just YouTube like we're on right now, but Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, WhatsApp, all of these. People are out here for a reason, to connect in some way, and some of them are out here because they don't have these type of connections at home as much as they want, so they're missing something or looking for something. And you may find people that are more willing to manipulate and not present things the way that they are, to gain that satisfaction, that achievement of uh, their life being different than what it actually is. In what I hate the term in real life, but I don't really have something to substitute it with.
Yeah, I know what you
But
mean.
in, their real life versus their online life. For me, I'd like my life to be the same. I'm online, but I don't. Anything that I say about my real life is absolutely like what it is. That's it. Like I don't make a distinction really between the two. um Maybe the level of relationships that you have, that would be distinctive,
Hmm.
and separate, because of course when in real life, you have your partners, you have people, tangible, touching, people. And here we have, I have relationships with icons in, birds and bears and balls and all kinds of things that aren't necessarily presenting themselves as a person to me, as a whole life absolute, person. And it can get a little strange. You admit, like
Yeah.
you can get a little awkward, and you can find yourself in situations where, you know it, these manipulation tactics are being used a little more often. um then
Mm.
you would run into them at home. Like I don't run into them, in my friendships at home as much as I do online. I don't know about anybody else, but um
Yeah, but I mean,
yeah.
maybe those people who you're friends with are like that online, and I think that's probably the difference to
Mm-hmm.
think about. Is that for some people, like I think for you and for me and for many other people, it's like you don't substantially change who you are or how you present between social
Mm-hmm.
media and your like kind of everyday life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of people, it's a veneer. It's their chance to be someone they're not in real life. It's their
Mm-hmm.
chance to kind of become important or become um, uh, like liked or like followed by people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not just as a friend, but as like a leader to some extent.
Right.
So, and I don't think that necessarily comes from like a place of wanting grandiosity or wanting to
Mm-hmm.
be leader. But I think when people are in like lonely places, and I think as you said earlier, the pandemic probably didn't help with this at all. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what people reach for. They want to have a following. They want to feel
Yeah.
important.
All of the studies that I was reading, they showed an increase in social media use during the pandemic, a absolute more time spent, more different types of social media being consumed. In other words, the two most popular were Facebook and YouTube. They kind of go hand in hand together, which surprised me because I'm not really a Facebook user anymore as much
Mm,
as I was in the past, but it's still a very, very popular trend all the way through the last study done at the end of 2021. So that showed the numbers increasing, the amount of time that the average person who does not have a social media addiction or a prevalence spends more than 6 hours a day checking socials, of all levels in
yeah.
during the pandemic. That's a lot of time. And that's not like they tried to weed out like work time and checking messages and things like that. They also said that most people increased the number of platforms they were on by 30%. In other words, they added one or two extra platforms, and maybe you only used Facebook, and now you use Facebook and YouTube and say TikTok or something like that. That people were reaching out more in and now it's the settling back. So there was more people out here for longer periods of time. Um,
Mm, yeah,
in
that
this
doesn't
way.
surprise me at all.
No. Mm.
Yeah,
I was like,
and
Aaron had something here for you. I'm going to put up this.
oh, okay.
He said, Bearded Heretic, I tend to look for an absolute inability to accept criticism, not just defensiveness, but a near invulnerability to it. I guess he's talking about in identifying someone with narcissistic trait or being
Mm,
manipulative. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I guess that could come from one or two places, and this is the thing, when you get to extremes, they tend to look like each other in a lot of cases, and not just in
Mm-hmm.
this, but in like politics and other psychological things. They tend to look like each other. You get similar behavior,
Mm-hmm.
so that
Mm-hmm.
that inability to accept criticism might be a defense mechanism for them, like their ego being completely derived from other people. So if I build my whole self-esteem on how other people think of me, and then somebody criticizes that, then that's going to start to break down my sense of worth, because
Right.
somebody is now saying I'm wrong, right? So in order to counter that, I need to be like, well, you're wrong about me being wrong. I can't be wrong because that would harm me to be wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we got to be. I think we got to be careful about just assuming that it's somebody being completely arrogant or completely
Mm-hmm.
self-inflated, because I think I would say more often than not, it comes from a place of low self-esteem and from a place
Mm-hmm.
of defensiveness where they can't accept criticism because that's what they've built their entire self-worth on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that can be hard in dealing with people, especially when you're trying to have conversations. And I like having conversations with both sides being represented all the time. I don't, I, it's kind of boring to have a conversation where everybody's agreeing about everything all the time.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of growth. There's not a lot of learning. I like to learn other people's positions. There's always in a conversation something you can learn, that they know better than you do, and you got to be open to listen to it, and you got to be willing to accept that your perception of something or your understanding of a definition, a key term, a fact, even can be wrong. Or you're not going to learn and grow. You're not going to advance to better arguments, better discussions, better knowledge of any subject, right? Well, I don't see that a lot here. I get a lot of, I don't know. You guys are on Twitter a lot. I see you guys also, and I'm on Twitter, and I see it. Like I'm not participating right now for another reason, but I see the arguments back and forth, and we see it a lot in the atheist community. I'm also an atheist. I don't get into the arguments because number one, I don't have strong enough knowledge of the language. And I have the one thing that I have learned on Twitter in regards to discussing anything with atheism is don't use the wrong word. Do not use the wrong word. That's it. Like you're just like packed up with a bow and they send you to some island somewhere. I don't know, but like you're out, you're gone.
Mhm.
Forget it. You've got nothing to say ever again. So I don't, because I've seen people get, just for a word, Luke, just for a word or their perception of, the definition of the word, get tore up. But the other parties really just sometimes, not always, I won't say this. I am very fortunate that the threads that I see with the atheists that are discussing them around currently do not do this. But in the past, I had seen people really get quite aggressive and quite just can't be wrong about it, and then
Mhm.
just make things like personal, and I
Yeah.
wonder like where that's coming from in a belief that you have to be so right. um like you said, it's got to be something personal as far as how they feel like about themselves. They can't like be wrong. And it's disheartening to see how far some people will go in their treatment of other individuals just to be right or
Yeah.
just not. Yeah.
I think you've brought up a really good example of where this is quite prevalent, actually, because I think a lot of the aggressive atheists on Twitter and even
Mm-hmm.
YouTube are ex-fundamentalist Christians.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I'm British. The other Answers and Reasons guys are British and Italian, so we're all from Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we don't really have the same kind of like level of like fundamentalism as America does.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
No, it's strong in America. Fundamental.
yeah,
It is very. It's prevalent. It is the most common, and it is one of those subjects where it is very difficult to discuss because it's so ingrained into the person as a person that
yeah,
they're um I'm trying to say this, like, I believe me, if I say this wrong, YouTube, don't come for me. I'm really not trying to be insulting. It is so ingrained in who we are as Americans, that what our religion is and all, we can't even have an honest discourse about it. We
Yeah.
can't. We just, it's almost, and I don't mean that in an unkind way. It is almost impossible. It is one of those subjects that just cannot be discussed openly without it turning personal, negative. The next thing you know, someone's going, "Yo mama." And I'm like, what? Like, how did we get here? It's just that, it's just too much. It's
Yeah.
just too much a part of the personality and how we were raised and what is in our foundations here. It can't be openly discussed, honestly.
So I guess, that's the place where these atheists are coming from. They've recently constructed or deconverted or converted, however people want to describe their journey, and then they're coming into a new way of thinking that has a lot of precedent online, especially on YouTube, with places like the atheist community of Austin and etc. And people like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and those
Yes.
types of people, right? So they're the people that they immediately turn to, and I think that they are not secure in what they believe or don't believe because of their, it takes a lot of effort and psychological resources to deconstruct in that way from such a fundamentalist position. There's a lot of distrust and disdain and bitterness left over residually from their perspective towards this other group, and they're not secure in their atheism, essentially, enough to be kind of accept that they could be wrong on being atheist. Because they were massively wrong. Their viewers, they were massively wrong on being Christian, to the point where they were like, a fundamentalist. That got broken down. If they're any more wrong, then that's going to really affect their self-worth because they're wrong again.
Right. Yeah.
So
and yet they're doing the same thing that they were against, that they actually came out of as a fundamentalist. They actually worked themselves through that, decided that that was the wrong way to be, and then come out here and act the same way, which to me is mind-boggling. Like, I hear you trying to explain why, and I'm still like, but you got yourself out of that. Why would you do it? Like, why would you do it all over again?
Well, I think there's a myth. I think there's a myth that being an atheist is easy, and that it doesn't require
No,
anything but disbelief
it doesn't.
in God, right?
No,
That's
that's
a
not
myth.
true.
Exactly, but that's what's perpetuated on YouTube by the big people on YouTube, the big channels and that. Whereas there's loads of things that we have to try and figure out. We have to figure out, what how are we going to react when someone dies, because that's going to be really difficult, to manage it. Religion has, or Christianity has, life after death. You can see your loved ones after you die. That's comforting. What would we do? And there's loads of other these other things, and so they're kind of leaning into this idea that it's easy and it's just this one thing, but without considering the rest of it. And if it becomes complex, and they consider it dogma, and they don't want to do that. They don't want to.
They don't want to address it at all. No, they don't. And I find, like, they don't want to give any grace. And I always think, like, a little bit of grace for everyone is always the best option at first, because it leaves you open to hear the other person's side. You don't know where they're actually coming from or what the reasoning is. So a little bit of grace is always appropriate in most of those kind of conversations, until it's not, until you're like attacked. I think I was one of the most upsetting conversations, and it wasn't even one that I wanted to have, or I coveted or went after having. Someone in a chat just came and said, "Oh, you're an atheist. Well, that just means you have no morals. You couldn't possibly have morals or ethics, because you need to have a God to balance that, because God gives you your morals and your ethics." And I was like, but we're talking right from wrong, and I don't see how a third party tells me what is right and wrong, like why
Mm.
that comes from me. I truly believe in right or wrong. It's something that have that comes from inside me, inside my moral fortitude, in what I believe, in what I see. And yes, society helps, and how you were raised by your family, and what everything that you see. And yes, that can be turned by things being made acceptable when they're not, and etc. I get all of that.
Mm.
But I'm talking about that one kernel in you that just gives you that little nagging thing on what's right and what's wrong, like all the time, comes from me, just me. No outside influence at the time. I was extremely offended, and and I just was dumbfounded. I didn't even know how to continue the conversation, because to me
Mhm.
that was like such a brutal personal attack. Like, to take away someone's morals and ethics because they're an atheist, it didn't make any sense to me. Well, mm, but you see what I mean? Like, they go so far. Like, did you know that, like, in some of the threads they're saying that atheists are responsible for Russia? It's like, which is kind of
They've been
comical,
trying to
but
pin that on us since
yeah,
World War II. So
this is what, right. But it's comical to us because we see it so often, but they actually are serious when they type it. I kid you not. A lot of them are serious when they type it. They really want to have that argument with us. And I'm like, okay,
yeah,
come
and I
along.
get that, and I think I get being offended by it as well. I think that even like
Mm-hmm.
someone like Jordan Peterson saying that he thinks that atheists would be like the lead character
Mm-hmm.
in Crime and Punishment, who murders someone for the betterment of his
Right,
community, and it's just like that's not
right.
that's not true. That's
It's
not.
not true.
Yeah,
Right.
one that book is about like economic pressure on people.
Ex- exactly. And the
You know,
choices we have to make to survive. It
exactly.
wasn't a moral. Yes, morals came into it, and ethics and things on certain levels, but it wasn't that. I
Yeah,
agree with you there.
exactly.
Grace, yeah, Grace is telling us that Grace is never the wrong choice, if I don't say so myself.
Okay.
And I kind of I agree with you. Always a little Grace. Let me
Yeah,
just pull up this other one before you continue, from Aaron. People who say atheists have no morals are unable to step out of their own worldview enough to understand where morals originate. They only understand morality via punishment. That kind of struck me,
yeah,
because there's a part of that about the punishment and judgment, that resonates with me. That statement. How about you?
yeah. Well, I mean, there is one issue within online atheism where there's a bunch of people that say that um, morals don't exist and they're completely subjective, and
Mm-hmm.
they're not. That means you get into loads of issues with that. I mean, that's a whole different topic, but you get into loads of issues with that because then you can justify it pretty much anything, because you can say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, well, that's what I view as right and wrong," um,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't fight that. So yeah,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
I know most people say morals are
Mm-hmm.
real things that come from somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
like whether it's
Right.
evolution or
Right.
something like that. But
Well,
yeah, I see
well,
that's a
well,
problem.
yeah, I do. And here's the twist to just bring it back into the conversation with this. Would you say then these type of arguments that they are using, and they are definitely have some narcissistic trait in unable to be wrong, or to fight
Yeah,
so hard for this?
that's actually
Um,
a good point
yeah.
with regards to. I've not thought of that before, but yeah, if somebody's saying like,
Mm-hmm.
morals are subjective, my
Mm-hmm.
morals are good, therefore I am superior than this
Mm-hmm.
group of people. But then it's like, what standard do you have to measure whether your morals are
Mm-hmm.
good or not? Because you say they're subjective.
Exactly,
You see that
right?
a lot. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Is part of the conversation of this narcissistic trait, unable to be wrong, unable to be judged. I find, even in atheism, when you organize too much, like an organized religion, and you become the judgment of everybody else out there, that's not part of your group, that's an issue. That
yeah.
is, then these traits are becoming prominent, and they start feeding on each other inside these groups, and it gets like it is out here on social media every day for me lately. It gets to be untenable, because there
Mm,
is no conversation going on. There is no openness. There's no grace. Um, no accepting that people can have different beliefs. That just because I don't believe as you does not make me that much different than you. It's one belief. Okay, we still have blood running through our veins. Our hearts pump the same. We, need the same nutrients to live.
Mm.
We came to this earth the same way, regardless of all of that. There's so much more in common than there is any difference. So why do you have to make it so darn personal? Why do you have to viscerate us? Literally viscerate us over a belief, because you don't want
Yeah.
to be wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a good way of checking yourself with that, because I mean, not you personally, Claire, but like checking oneself with that, is trying never to say you're wrong about that,
Mm-hmm.
because that assumes that you're right when you're talking, right? So if you go into a conversation and you're like, okay, I'm not going to claim that they're wrong. I'm going to try and understand what they're trying to say and
Mm-hmm.
why they might believe that, and I'm going to try and explain my perspective to persuade them that what I'm saying is more accurate. You get a
Mm-hmm.
much better conversation than just saying you're wrong. Like,
Exactly.
especially if you do it in capital letters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the worst thing you can do in a conversation, because it breaks it down, and you're only doing it because to preserve your evaluation of yourself that you're correct, and that's it. You're
Mm-hmm.
not doing it because you are correct.
Mm-hmm. No, and I can see that more people would appreciate being approached in that manner. I know,
Mm.
just the use of the language that we use. If you're going to be talking about what you believe, you can say I. But usually when talking with another person, do not say you said this, or you mean this, or you are coming off this way. You are automatically like putting like a wall up of misconception, like, with the person, that you've already judged everything that's coming out of them,
Mm.
and you're not open. I know I don't appreciate it. I don't like being told what I mean. If you don't
Yeah,
understand, ask me for clarification. Say something like, I think you are saying this. Is that what you mean? Like, not like you did this, you did that. Like, I'm like,
yeah,
wait
absolutely.
a minute. I actually think I know what I said and did. Like me, like I do, because like I'm the one who said it. Well, I can understand you might misunderstand it, or maybe I didn't express myself clearly enough, and maybe I am at fault with how I presented it to you in the language that I use. Let me correct it though, but try not to like beat me in the head with a little bit of judgment first, because it kind of makes you not want to have the conversations. And I like to talk. I like to have conversations. Everybody knows that. I talk too much. I talk. There's a nice comment here for us from the Afro humanist. Welcome, Esther. I appreciate this conversation because I'm the only atheist around me, and the other atheists I know are all online. It's a hard lesson to learn, and I'm still learning how to live the God-free life. It is, because I kind of resonate with that. I'm still finding my way too, and even just getting that conversation into many of the other conversations that matter, like this one about narcissism and social media. It did come up because it was a perfect example of what we live with online every day, in those threads, and
Mm.
in panels even, and other discussions, just going, just having people come to the live chats.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
And what I would say to that is part of, because I think I've seen a few of Afro-humanist videos,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and this applies to everyone actually. Don't limit yourself to criticizing religious people.
Right.
There's
Mm-hmm.
plenty to criticize within our own group.
Exactly.
And
Mm-hmm.
then, I think, people are right when they say, or there's only one thing that links all atheists, that they don't believe in God or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the same thing for Christians, right? There's only one thing that they believe that links them, which is that they have a belief in God.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't really convince me. And I think that it's
Mm-hmm.
okay to criticize
It,
other
it, it,
atheists, and in fact, that's the only way we're going to improve the way we discuss things.
it is, because it's really not a matter of what we believe. It's a matter of how we are conducting ourselves with it. I believe that. I know that sounds all like, get up on a soapbox, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter what I believe. It's how I'm conducting myself with it that matters the most. How I'm treating you about it, Luke, or everybody else in the chat. That matters more than what my belief is. I don't have to go out there and beat everybody up with what I believe. It's
Mm,
more important to treat people decently and the
yeah.
way I would want to be treated. Mrs. Cassandra says, I am all. I am all for everyone to believe whatever they want to, but don't come at me trying to convince me my beliefs aren't right. And that's the same thing when you're trying to twist it. But there are people like to debate. So often in our community, would you agree, Luke, that we do see this? They do want to debate. They want to debate theists,
Oh,
atheists and theists. They have this common thing about each other. They like to debate each other on it. They do. And
I think
some
there's
of them really have a need to be right about it.
yeah,
it's just,
yeah.
it's the extent of that need that troubles me, which is why I wanted to have this conversation about
Hmm.
narcissism in
So
social
actually,
media.
yeah, this is a really good point because I think that so our identities are usually made up with a bunch of different things. So like I'm somebody. I'm an atheist. I'm a magician sometimes. I do magic
Mm,
tricks. I do photography. I have my friends and my family. Then I have an identity with them. I have an identity at work. I have an identity within kind of like with my partner. So there's loads of various things that kind of like are
mhm,
facets of me that are different, right? The what you could get is that somebody only really has one or two things that they identify with, right? They don't have much to their identity, and that's like a really unstable type of identity because it means that it's really easy to break down. Like if somebody come up to me and said, "Do you mind me swearing?"
mhm,
If somebody
mhm.
come up to me and said, "You're a shit magician,"
Right.
that wouldn't affect me, right? I'm not bothered
No,
because I have many other
no.
aspects of my life that I feel good at.
Mhm,
Okay, I might be a
mhm,
shit magician. That's fine.
mhm,
I'm good at other things, right?
mhm.
The problem
You
comes
know
in
what?
if
You
so,
go
yeah.
on. I'm sorry. No,
If
I was just laughing because you asked me if it was
if I could
okay
swear,
for
yeah, and
you
then
to. And
I
have
realized
you
who I was
not?
talking
Had you
to.
realized where you are? Right, like
Yeah, I
the whole
realized who I
chat
was
just
talking to.
probably cracked up. No,
I
go
have to
ahead.
check
I'm
that.
sorry.
Um,
Go ahead.
um, if I only have one facet of my identity, so it's atheism, right? And then someone comes
Mhm,
along and says, "Oh, essentially says you're a shit atheist, or you're not doing atheism right, or whatever. This isn't what you mean it is, and stuff like that." That is going to be a massive impact on them. That's when you're going to see the aggression. That's when you're going to see the
mhm,
insults and the kind of
mhm,
like the attempting to regain control. And I think that that's
mhm,
something that we need to talk about actually when we're talking about narcissism,
mhm,
narcissistic traits particularly, is the control aspect.
mhm,
Because that's when somebody will begin to try and overwhelm that individual. They'll start to use power play in order to try and kind of recoup that kind of like that
mhm.
lost criticism, essentially, that lost
Right.
self-worth, because it's only that one thing. That's all they. And I think a lot of people who are online who are atheists, that is their identity. They are an
Mhm,
atheist.
right.
um they don't really have much else, which is, I mean, that's I'd recommend to everyone, get other things in your life that are important to you, not just
Not
your
just
your
one.
lack of
Mhm,
belief or
mhm.
belief that God doesn't exist.
Because in all things, balance is what keeps us sane, keeps us happy, and moving forward. You need balance in all things like that. That's a good one. But on that light, because it is such a big, it is about control. It is about manipulation. It does get aggressive. We have about 10 minutes left. How would you
Mhm.
suggest that people running into this, some of the ways you can back out of it safely?
Yeah.
Without being insulting to the other person, in some, like, do you have any suggestions with your wealth of knowledge? I mean, I could sit here for hours with you talking about this. This is true, but we did decide, I'm going to keep it to an hour, but I do hope that you'll come back and we
Oh,
can
of
have more
course.
discussions on this. And to those of you listening in the chat that also have a lot to say about this, and I know who you are, hit me up, because I do want to talk about this more often. It needs to be talked about more often. But on that, Luke, can you give them some ideas for those of us listening later, on those of them in the chat, how we can navigate these conversations a little more successfully, or at least try, and then when they don't work, how to get out of them with our skin, so to speak?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think um the first thing to do is understand what the behaviors, what the function of the behavior is. Is it a defense mechanism? Is it somebody trying to exert power over you? Like I had a situation on Twitter where somebody tried to do some kind of power play in the discussion, and I exposed it for what it was. I just said I'm not okay with you using power dynamics with me, and it called it out, and it kind of diffused the situation to a certain extent, because it was like kind of like I'd highlighted what they were doing essentially, and there was no way of them arguing. But I wouldn't recommend that all the time. Power dynamics are very complicated, because I mean, that's again, like, I'll have to come back because we need to talk about how that can impact on people's lives and stuff. But if someone's trying to exert power, the best thing you can do is take that power away from them, is to not engage with it. So if somebody's trying to exert, like they're trying to overwhelm you, trying to threaten you with things, trying to make out like what they're doing isn't actually that big a deal, and that it's you, like that kind of gaslighting thing, it's you that's perceiving it wrong, which is always a funny thing, because I don't know how someone can perceive something wrong like that.
I know,
the best thing to do is to not engage with it, to switch off from it. Don't give them the satisfaction of kind of like engaging with it, because the more, and this is the annoying paradox, the more you kind of engage with it, the more you put into it, the more power they have in that situation. And they will use all, like, I think a lot of people who get involved in this play fair. I play fair. I know I'm sure you play fair, Claire.
I do, and I won't engage. I mean, I'm going through that right now, and I absolutely refuse to engage with ridiculousness. There's nothing to discuss. I'm not going to do it.
So if this is the thing, we have our standards and our values, which don't allow us to kind of use the same tactics that somebody who is kind of using these power dynamics and control behaviors are using, right? So that puts us at a disadvantage immediately, because we're not willing to go to that level. But
I do think that they think it appears weaker. But I have to tell you, it takes a lot more not to engage. I'll tell you that, because I have been known to have a rant here and there, and I'm an opinionated person. To sit on my hands while this ridiculousness is going on is probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But it's the right thing, because I won't feed it. I won't feed the foolishness. I'm not going to give credit to something that has no credibility. Does that make any sense? Like, it's just
absolutely.
Just to be bullied and harassed, to what end? For what? No.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what that, because like if we think about it as like a physical situation rather than like an online one, because I think in terms of how we imagine it, I think it's easier if somebody's shouting and screaming at you and they're like trying to impose on you and intimidate you in real life, and you leave that situation, which is a lot easier to do online than I think it is in person sometimes.
Yes.
They're shouting at an empty room, right?
Yeah, they are.
What's the point in that, right?
And they get upset for a while about it, because you're not giving them the relevancy they seek. You're not paying attention to their voice, and I understand that. Let them get mad and all, but I'm still not going to do it, because your relevancy is only to attack and ridicule. It's not even to have a discussion. So what's the point? On that. This is a question we may not be able to answer today, because we only have a few more minutes, but it is something that perhaps others in the chat or Luke himself would like to come and discuss, and maybe even yourself, Afro-Humanist. How do you deal with the angry phase when becoming an atheist? You mean when we're first coming to that? I think you mean when we're first coming to that acknowledgement within ourselves. That's a good one. And
that's a great question.
It is, and that needs to be talked about more too. When you first come out, there's a big atheist community. I have 2,000 Twitter followers. At least 1,200 of them are atheists. But there's nowhere for me to go to talk about the floundering that happens when you first come out. You're an atheist, and you don't have anybody to talk to about it, because you could get chewed up for using the wrong word.
This is a really good place for me to plug the book that I've been writing for over a year.
Please do. I was going to ask you to bring it up. Notice how I just did that, like tossed it right at you, Luke. I'm good at that. Yeah? Okay.
So I think there's various things. I think educating yourself about what what it means to be atheist and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
the implications that come along with that, because there are implications. I think we need to not deny ourselves that. So
Mhm.
I think there's various ways. I'm currently writing a book which tries to address all of those things, and it is complex. And the book is on standby at the moment because I'm a very busy person at the moment. So
Yes.
yeah, I'm trying to do it, but I think it's about kind of like
Mhm.
understanding yourself and being secure in yourself more than
Mhm.
anything else.
Mhm.
Um,
Because that is where our belief of it comes from. I mean, it's really not an outside thing. I find it's an inside thing. It was completely internal for me, with no outside influence whatsoever.
mm.
So I come from a stronger point of it, I think, because I'm pretty solid in what I believe. It's just expressing it that I have,
Yeah, and I
eh,
mean, I think it's,
and where to express it and how
yeah,
to express it.
it seems to me as well, and I don't know, Claire, if you agree, but a lot of that anger comes from one, feeling like you've been lied to, and
Hmm.
two, um, feeling as though other people are constantly trying to change your mind back.
Hmm.
And I think the second one is easier to address because if you're secure in what you believe or don't believe, however you want to phrase it,
Hmm.
um, then that won't affect you. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
They can
Hmm.
convince you. They can try and convince you all you want. Like,
Hmm.
that's their prerogative. And
Hmm.
I see a lot of hypocrisy in the atheist online
Hmm.
community because there's a lot of
It,
people that
yeah.
that don't accept people trying to change their minds, but then go about trying to change everyone else's mind. It's like,
Exactly. And actually, the part of being an atheist is the ability to just accept that there can be different views on things,
yeah,
extremely. Like, and there needs to be hard evidence to prove it either way. And you don't have it in a conversation. So you need to be open. I mean, nobody's sitting there with all the hard evidence right in front of them like a Rolodex. Like, you need to be
mm,
more open. And I had thought. That's how the atheist community would be accepting of it. But I learned quickly, not so much. I do feel for you, the Afro humanists, because I also like I had the anger, but mine more came from judgment, not so much the lies, because I do believe people need to believe in an organized religion or any kind of organization. They do covet a set of rules themselves of what they believe, and they could be perceived by others as lies or misinformation, but it is something they eternally believe. So I'm not going to really judge them for pushing it on me because it's what they believed. But to be judged for not believing it, for being judged so harshly for being outside that circle of belief, that I don't understand. That's where I had my anger from. Like, I don't
mm,
get that. Like, I'm still a human. I'm still your daughter, your sister, your neighbor, your mother. I still am. Just because my belief is not yours. When did that change? When did I become less than? Because I don't believe the same as you. Why am I less than? Why are you judging? That I have issues with. That's where my anger comes from. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think that's understandable.
All right. Yeah, yeah. Well, so we have filled an hour, Luke.
Wow.
Luke's channel and his Twitter are down below. He doesn't have his book done, or I would have linked it because I can't wait to read this. I really can't because I think it's going to be very helpful. This has been a very pleasant chat. I hope that you all enjoyed it in the chat. Thank you for being here and participating with us the way you did. Thank you so much, Luke, for giving me your time. I know how busy you are, and so it meant a lot that you arranged this for me. I look forward to hopefully having other conversations with you about it when you can work something out, and we can do it again because I want to do more of these side-by-side library chats, just a little bit honest with people, and letting
Yeah,
them talk about it.
yeah, and I'd like to. I mean, I'd love to talk a bit more about narcissism and
Mm-hmm.
other kind of like personality traits that might appear like that because I think it's important that people kind of understand stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
It
yeah,
is.
I'm up for coming
Mm-hmm.
back and talking about that. That's good.
Thank you. It looks like we made friends. Good. And hopefully we made friends with everybody in the chat too. And the rest of you on YouTube, hitting that replay and all, spread it around. If you want to have conversations, just hit me up. I'm open for it. But on that, I'm going to put the outro on. I'm going to let you go on with your day. Thank you again, Luke. And thank you, everybody in the chat. I've got a really nasty trial to go attend and do commentary on, like just the other flip of the coin. So I will see you all later on in the day. Thanks again, Luke. You have
Nice,
a
thank
great
you.
evening. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.